So my name is PJ, and I manage a UX product design team at Amazon, and that's a picture of them right there in our previous room. It was really small and cavernous. There were no windows. It was really terrible. We have a better room now, but that's them. And we specialize in creating, from start to finish, customer-facing features for Amazon's retail pages on our website. This is an example of one of them right here. Just to give you guys an idea of what we do. And these go on all of the categories and all of the Amazon websites around the globe. And a while back, my team and I were assigned to this retail initiative within the company, and our portion of the project was creating a custom UI like this that would display dynamic content in a really cool way. And my team had worked really hard on this, and they had done an awesome job. I was so proud of what they had done. The stakeholders were happy, right? We were almost finished. It was pretty much on its way out the door. Design was done. We were in the final stages of pre-launch testing when our stakeholders asked for one final project review. So we go on the day of that review into the conference room, me and my team, and we find our stakeholders there waiting for us. And to my surprise, there's a third group in the room as well. The development team that owned the dynamic content that our UI would be displaying. This isn't the UI, but I can't show it. So my heart sinks on seeing this group in the room because conference room ambushes they're never a good thing, right? So I try to shake that off because the work that my team had done was so awesome, right? And we plug into the projector and we begin our demo, and I'm sure you guys see where this is going. 45 minutes later, we just limped out of this room, right? We limped out of this room. Our portion of the project had been canceled, right? That UI that my team had created, they'd spent hundreds of hours refining. We were so happy with it. It was about to launch, had been shelved, and would never see a single customer click, right? So we go back to that terrible room with no windows, and I slump into my desk and start pitying myself and thinking the thoughts that I normally think after these kinds of reviews. And And after I get through that, I ask myself a question that can be quite useful sometimes, right? What could I have done to prevent this from happening, right? What could I have done differently? Because believe me when I tell you, I've been through this a lot. I have failed a lot in my career. This was not my first time I'd had a project go disastrously off the rails like this. And I was thinking through all the other examples, and I realized that whenever this kind of thing happens, usually there's somewhere a foundational breakdown in communication or collaboration. Right? And this is important because designers today need to be effective collaborators, right? The businesses that we work in, whether we're talking about a 5-person startup or a 50,000-person enterprise, they are amazingly complex and chaotic and messy things, right? And if we want any hope of getting good work done within them, we have to be able to operate in that kind of landscape. Right? And this means, as designers, we need to be effective at identifying and prioritizing opportunities, right? Managing inputs from key stakeholders, driving our projects to achieve the right goals, and in a lot of ways, right? Like just being excellent at the craft of design is no longer really enough, right? We have to also be effective design project managers as well. And if those of you saw the talks from the folks from Google and Uber today, you heard them essentially telling stories where they were playing at certain times this kind of design management role. Right, so the thing about that is that functioning in this kind of way requires strong communication and collaboration skills. Right, and unfortunately, in my experience, these tend to be some of the most overlooked and underdeveloped in any designer's tool set, right? Like, and there's a good reason for it, and that's the fact that communicating is really hard. Like, it is really hard for us. You would think that the fact that our ability to talk with one another is one of the defining features of our species, so we should have gotten the hang of it by now, but we haven't, and we struggle with it all the time, right? Within the business context and without it as well. And this is something that my team at Amazon knows really, really well because our internal and external user base is globally distributed, right? That means, which comes with its own unique grab bag of challenges, right? Like time zones and the fact that many of our internal users, they don't speak the same language that we do sometimes, right? They don't have the same working hours that we do, which means if we have a simple, the simplest of questions becomes a 24-hour turnaround time, right? So there's a lot of massive communication hurdles that my team has to deal with. But they never get a break because even when they're not working with stakeholders, even when they're just working with each other, my team has to grapple with communication issues. Because on my team, we have 5 different job disciplines. We have UX designers, front-end developers, back-end developers, prototypers, and program managers. And we work extremely agile on my team, right? So all 5 of these job classes will work on the same projects at the same time, right? In the same sprints. And we don't do things like stagger it so that like design begins first and then development begins after design documents have been generated. We start and we work in parallel. So all these different groups can attack the same problem from multiple angles. And I love this approach, right? I love this way of working. It's really, really exciting. It's so great to get to see, whenever it works really well, it's so great to see these 5 different job disciplines engage one another in this really interesting dialogue, right? They can challenge and inspire one another, right? And this always pushes the work to levels that we just couldn't have gotten to if we had taken a more traditional or siloed approach. But as great as this approach is when it works well, it's also exhausting, right? It's exhausting and it's chaotic and it's messy and it's really difficult, right? Because it is really, really hard to work so intimately with people who are different from us, right? It's really hard working so closely with someone who doesn't share your same background or your values or your interests, right? It's like speaking a whole different kind of language, and that can lead to a lot of frustration, that can lead to a lot of drama, that can lead to a lot of issues, and every single person on the team has to be bought into this for it to work, right? Because it requires hard work on their part. But I think ultimately it's a good challenge, right? Like working so closely with people who are different from us, it helps us grow, both as individuals, as practitioners of our crafts, as people who need to talk to other people, right? So and it ultimately strengthens the team and the work that we do. So let's go back to that terrible meeting where we walked in with an awesome project and walked out dragging the carcass of a dead UI behind us. The thing that I think I probably did a good job of implying that it was the inclusion of that third party, that development team, that led to the death of the project, right? And they did want to kill it. They moved to kill it in that meeting. They were not fans of the work that we had done, and they were not happy with the idea of having to support our UI with their service. But there's a part I left out when I was telling you that earlier, and that's the fact that I knew about them. I knew about them from the very beginning of the project, and I knew that they would not be comfortable with the work we were doing, and I knew why, right? They had their own UI that displayed the exact same content, which by default made our 2 UIs competitors with one another, right? Which is kind of weird. My team didn't mean anything by this. We were very earnestly just trying to innovate on the UI of this awesome content that they owned, but it's really easy to see from their perspective how what we were doing could be seen as invasive. Right, so if anyone's responsible for this happening, it's me, right? Because I missed an opportunity to head this off at the pass, right? I could have reached out to them, I could have began communicating and collaborating with them, but I didn't. And in asking myself what I could have done differently in that windowless room, I realized that I failed miserably at 4 very important things that are necessary for effective collaboration. These 4 steps for communicating and collaborating effectively, which I would like to walk through today. Also very thirsty. So the first step 1 to collaborating and communicating effectively, is to be accessible and transparent. Right, so I did not make myself very available to this development team throughout the course of the project. They actually reached out to me fairly early on when they heard about it, and they asked me some questions and they raised some concerns. And instead of answering those questions and putting those concerns at ease, I pushed them to our project stakeholder, and I said, hey, please go talk to them if you want this answer and this context you're looking for. And this was such a dumb mistake. Like that was really, really stupid. Because if we want to effectively collaborate and work with people, we have to go out of our way to make ourselves available, accessible, and transparent. Right? So as a designer, like what are the ways we can make our work really, really transparent to the people that we have to work with? I think that walls are a fantastic way to do this. So walls with a capital W, also known as working walls or war rooms. My team makes walls for all of our projects. And for those of you who haven't worked with walls before, they're really easy to set up. They're very simple. Basically, you just take all the materials for a project, sketches, wireframes, whatever. If it's in a computer, you get it out of the computer and into the real world. And then you paper an entire section of a physical wall with these materials, right? And these are great. The team just updates them as they continue to work. So oftentimes several times a day, they refresh the content on the walls. And then as a group, either with your fellow designers on your team or with your stakeholders, you can have reviews in front of the walls where your design discussions happen with you literally walking the wall and using those materials to guide your discussions and your debates. So we rely on them as a central tool then for us to effectively collaborate with one another. It helps us come together as a single unit and work through a problem as a team. And one of the things, though, that I often find sort of myself struggling with, especially with newer designers, is that when you want something to be really awesome, right? Like it's really, really understandable and really natural to kind of keep it to yourself for a while you're figuring it out until it reaches a certain level of quality where you decide that now it's ready for other humans to look at it. And if you want to effectively collaborate in an agile environment with people who are not you, you need to do a good job of resisting this urge. Right? You have to get really comfortable showing the work when it's in progress, right? And that means showing things when you haven't figured it out, when you're still confused in the project, when you don't know what you're doing, when the stuff that you have is just like weird or like really, really chaotic or just like silly, right? Like a lot of this stuff is really important because even though it seems like almost seems unprofessional sometimes, like this one, it's really helpful because it shows to the people that you're working on this project with how you're deconstructing the central design problem, right? And that's information that they need to be able to work with you, and that they can't get if they just see some highly polished mock-up, right? So walls are great because they force you to design in the open like this. And in fact, when we, I just pointed at the TV for this, when we work with a stakeholder on a project, we'll even put our walls in a public place, such as a hallway in the Amazon offices, that the stakeholder can go and access whenever they want, right? So they don't need to come through us. They can just come and see the latest work that the team has done. I love this photo right here. I want to share this photo with you guys. So that is one of the walls that we put in a hallway. And that's some guy that I don't know at Amazon, just some dude who works there. And I was coming back from the bathroom one day to our office, and I found this guy just stopped like that. And he stayed there for like another 5 minutes, just literally reading everything on that wall. And we were at the really early stages of this project, so he's looking at really, really bad doodles and like assumptions that turned out to be flat out wrong, and like screenshots of competitors. So it's not even important information, right? But he has stopped everything in his day to look at the thinking that's going into this project, right? So it's uncomfortable at first to get to the point where you're designing in the open like this, right? Like it can be really uncomfortable for designers to put themselves in such a vulnerable position. But as uncomfortable as it is for us to get used to that, it's infinitely more uncomfortable for our stakeholders and our colleagues when they don't have this level of visibility into the design, right? Because for non-designers, and I'm sure you guys have probably learned this in your own experiences, for non-designers, design is this kind of weird black box, right? They don't understand what goes into it. They don't really understand why the things that come out of it. It has this like almost mystical or magical or divinely inspired quality to a lot of them. And anything that we can do to break that down, to break that misconception down, and to reveal design as the analytical and objective problem-solving activity that it should be, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us, that's a good thing for them, and it's a good thing for us being able to collaborate. So walls are a fantastic way to be transparent and accessible. Step 2 is listening. So you need to be able to listen. So like a lot of corporate cultures, Amazon has an annual performance review cycle. And one wonderful part of that cycle is the section where we will write feedback on our employees, right? Our other coworkers, people we've worked with over the past year. And I wanted to share with you guys some feedback that was written about a member of my team. It was written to him. So it goes like this. It goes, one thing that's been mentioned is that people feel like you're not really listening sometimes. Like you're just waiting for the other person to finish their sentence so that you can make your point. I've also picked up on this in various meetings. I can see the gears turning in your head, either to defend yourself or to make your point, and it becomes clear that you're not fully listening to what the people in the room are saying. Right? And this is really, really common feedback. I receive it a lot about the people on my team, and whenever I'm coaching them on how to be more effective communicators and collaborators, right? Like time and time again, listening emerges as one of the most difficult parts. And there's actually a really good reason for that. So listening, like communicating, is also hard, but it's actually scientifically hard. It's hard because our brains can listen to, or can think at about up to 3,000 words per minute, right? But our dumb ears can only hear up to 250 words per minute, right? So this means that whenever you have to listen to someone, you actually have to actively slow your brain down in order to be able to listen to them, right? It takes a real effort. That's why it's called active listening. And as soon as you slip into passive listening, well, then your brain outruns your ears, and then boom, before you know it, you're no longer listening at all, right? You're thinking about something else. You're thinking about what you're going to say when they're done. Like just think about how many times you or someone you know has done the stuff that's in this feedback. I know I have because this feedback was written about me. So, think about how great it feels when someone listens to you, right? When people listen to us, we feel special, right? We feel valued, we feel meaningful. We feel like the person who's listening to us cares, and we begin to trust that person just because they're listening to us, right? Which, that might be a security flaw for humans, but like, it's true. We begin to develop some sort of trust just based on that one fact. And when you have that trust, then you can start layering on things like a relationship or some sort of connection, and you can begin collaborating and communicating with them effectively. So I did not listen to that development team. I'm sure that's not a surprise. They were actually at one point willing to compromise with us. They were willing to support our UI if my team accommodated some feature requirements that they had. Feature requirements that I was not particularly fond of. So I kind of gave them the equivalent of like I told them we have a time, like we have a deadline coming up. It's really crunched. We don't have the time for this. Maybe for V2, right? Like maybe we'll do it then. So again, another big mistake, because as difficult as listening it is anyway, due to the fact that it requires real effort, it's really critical that we listen even when we're listening to something that we don't want to listen to, right? Either because it's painful or challenging. So step 3. Step 3, this should be an easy one. Step 3 is be a person, right? Like, this should be one that I should be able to do, but I didn't. I didn't do this one either. I failed at this one too, because this is what it looked like when I was talking with those people, with that development team throughout the course of the project. This is a screenshot of our internal trouble ticketing system at Amazon. Every conversation that we had took place on this system or via email, right? And like, well, what's the problem with that, right? Like digital communication mediums are very commonplace, right? Well, the problem is that they're also awful for working through any sort of real problem with other human beings, right? In terms of dialogue that is really deep and meaningful, they're just really suboptimal, right? They lack all of the hallmarks of really important interpersonal communication, right? There's no tone, there's no ability to emote meaningfully outside of like emojis. There's no subtlety, there's no quick back and forth, right? There's no human connection. And this is part of the reason that there's so much research that shows that when we engage one another like this, we don't even think of ourselves, or of them, of the people we're talking to, as people, right? We just see avatars on a byline. We don't think of them as the actual people. This is critical because when you work in a collaborative environment like this, you have to come to know the people that you're working with as people, right? There needs to be a two-way respect where you respect them as individuals and they respect you back, right? And the only way to do that is to periodically become people, like actual people. So find a way to do that, right? Like start finding ways to identify when it's a good thing to communicate in a digital medium, and when you need to do something like pick up the phone or go meet in person or go grab a coffee or swing by their desk, right? Because this is really important. Again, this is another thing that my team and I struggled with because of the fact that our users are globally distributed, right? This means that we will most likely not meet many of them in face-to-face, ever. And we were really struggling with the fact that the only way we had to work with them was in that trouble ticketing system or an email, right? It was really getting in our way when it came to trying to support them. So we were thinking about how we could create some sort of human connection with them, and we came up with this idea of forums. Forums are these semi-regular meetings that we hold. They're about an hour long usually, and they start with my team giving updates on our roadmap, showing in-progress work to preview an upcoming launch, doing demos and tutorials, stuff like that. And then for the second half of the meeting, we open it up to general Q&A and discussion so that our users can have a chance to talk to us as people, right? We will live stream it so that people can see the material regardless of where they are in the world. And then we open up conference lines so people can talk to us with their voices. And this allows us to be people, at least in a semi-regular basis, right, with the people that we support, even if they're on the other side of the planet. So the fourth and final step to collaborating effectively is to work with people and not at them, right? So this right here is another shot of people standing and looking at stuff on a wall, which I've shown you a lot of them. And I've talked a little bit about the importance of collaboration on my team and the extension of collaboration across the 5 disciplines that make up my team. But there's another very important extension of this idea of collaboration, and it's what's happening in this shot here. This is actually a stakeholder review or a client review, right? And I'll bet if I didn't say that, you guys wouldn't have been able to pick out the fact that these 2 people right here closest to the wall are actually our clients. So they're members of the business team. We structure all of our client interactions this way. Every shot I show you from here on out is some sort of progress review with the stakeholder. And I like to say that we work with them, right, instead of at them, right? We tried a more traditional approach when I first was building this team, where we would, like solicit a project brief and we could like vanish into a black hole for a few weeks, and then we just emerge with these options that we would try to like impose on them. And we found that just never worked, right? Like there was a lot of churn, which is not a good word, and there was a lot of back and forth that came out of it because they were always resisting what we were proposing. So we decided to try something different and actually invite them into the design process, right? And we began including them in it in a way that gave them the opportunity to participate as active members of the design, right? They join us for whiteboarding sessions. They are part of our internal team reviews and not just, or they're welcome to our internal team reviews and not just the ones we set up especially for them. We've even had stakeholders help us administer usability studies in the past. And so it's a really interesting way of kind of engaging them. And you might think that, wow, this seems kind of dangerous, right? Like just inviting them so closely, it almost seems like you're just like begging them to micromanage and art direct you. And for a while, I was really kind of afraid of that happening when we first started. But we found that never happens. And I think that it never happens because when you invite your stakeholders this close into the process, they have a chance to actually learn what design is. Right? They start to shed this notion of design as something that's purely visual or ornamental or magical, and they begin to appreciate it for this problem-solving and communication activity that it is. And when they do that, they become a lot more comfortable with the thought of yielding design authority to the design team. So they stop fighting you on all these like dumb arguments about color or font or like button size, right? And they start focusing on the really meaningful and valuable things that they have to contribute, like their marketing insights and their business insights, right? And they get to then see the design team take that and make the product better. So it gives them an opportunity to collaborate with the team. Here's another shot. So in closing, it's really unfortunate that I managed to fail so disastrously at like all 4 of these steps with that development team. I really could not have communicated or collaborated with them like any less effectively or less professionally. So it's no real surprise looking back at it like why this turned out so badly. And whenever I look at those past experiences, those other disasters, I can point to at least one major failure of the items on this list. So I don't know if following them would have necessarily saved that specific UI, right? Like it might have just been doomed from the start. But I am pretty sure that it wouldn't have turned out the way it did, right? It would never have gotten to the point where we were canceling it at the last minute and throwing away so many hours of hard work. And then I have validated that since then in other challenging projects that following these principles, right, it can help bring you closer to the people that make up your projects, whether it's a colleague or a stakeholder or a client. It can help turn potential adversaries into allies, and then it can help you guys find really creative ways to achieve solutions that make sense for everyone. So that is it, and I could not figure out what to put over here, so I found this video of some people on my team trying to figure out how to ride this unicycle. So this goes on for a minute while we start Q&A.
Excellent.
You guys are only going to remember me for this.
Yeah, I'm completely transfixed to unicycle riding lessons at the. So it sounds to me like this has been a big transition at Amazon to really start thinking about design in this very sort of open way. And I'm wondering, since you've started doing this, you've had new people join the team, right?
Yeah.
But you had a whole bunch of people who were on the team before you started doing it.
Yes.
Which group found it harder to make the transition? Do you find that you have to work harder with the new folks or with the folks who'd been there and you had to re-groove them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think my answer will be a little bit different because while there has been this kind of company-wide design renaissance, my team, my specific team is just one team in a group of I think we have something like 5,000 designers in Amazon now. So we're a small section of that. Yeah, so we're hiring. The folks from Amazon Music are here. If you want to talk to them and get a job here, I'm going to be hiring next year. So just throwing that out there. But so what we found specifically, what we found specifically on my team was kind of counterintuitive. We actually, with the team that started it, we almost kind of created this as a unit, this new way of working together, and we had an opportunity to experience when it didn't go right before in the other model, which helps kind of spur us and inspire us to go with this different approach. And now I'm finding that whenever new people join my team, they come with a lot of baggage, right? They come with a lot of experience working in other places where we don't work like this, and I have to kind of spend a lot of time untraining them, right? And especially when it comes to designing in the open. There's been a lot of times where like we'll be in stand-ups or whatever, and I'll have to, in the stand-up, realize that I haven't seen work from a designer and ask them to like leave stand-up and go make a wall right now, just because they're not used to like the mechanics of working in this kind of way. So it's been harder training new people coming in than it was when we first started it.
Okay. Look, oh, lots of questions. I'm going to take questions from places in the room we haven't gotten. So we're going to start over there, and then where else? Did we have a question over here somewhere? Did I see it? No? Oh,
Hi,
okay.
thanks for your talk. My question is, how do you handle the wall with distributed teams?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we have a couple of mechanisms for handling the wall with distributed teams. For one, we've actually had reviews where we like use our laptop, right, and use like the video conferencing to show them the wall. And that works when we're having that one meeting. But then whenever we do that, we also, it adds an amount of overhead to it. We also have to then go take copies of the artifacts that we found and find a way to put them on some sort of digital way for them to access it. So typically what we'll do, and it is a lot of extra work, but it's always been worth it, is you have all your stuff on the wall, you have your reviews back and forth, and then you either take pictures of it all or you have your digital copies, and you put that in some place in your intranet or what have you, or send them to them in an email, so that they also have the digital copies as well. That answer the question? You have to do both, yeah.
Okay. I'll take this question here and then one back there.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. My question is, how do you manage a very contradictory stakeholder feedback, like say two stakeholders do not agree on the same thing, and you get both the inputs, so how do you manage that?
Well, the good thing is that whenever you can get those different stakeholders with their, and that was what you're saying, right? The different stakeholders with conflicting input. If you can get both of those stakeholders in front of the wall, that takes care of itself, right? So a lot of the times whenever if we have a complex stakeholder set up and we notice that there's a lot of conflicting information, we do everything that we can to get those parties that are in conflict together with us in front of a wall and let that conversation kind of take care of itself. Like we play a driving factor because usually as the design team we have an opinion on which one we think is the right one to go to. But once you have that chance to have a real live dialogue in front of real materials and everyone can kind of see what's going on under the hood, then it almost always turns into a non-issue, right? The people who are in conflict eventually will reach some sort of agreement, and then you'll go from there.
Back there, there's a question.
Another wall question. As the years go by, more and more of the work we're doing is not flat, it's not static, it's moving, it's responding to touch, it's responding to different temporal aspects. So how do you handle that kind of work in a public area on a wall that's constantly being updated?
Yeah, that's a good, especially, I guess it kind of depends on what it is that you're trying to do. So like our prototypers on my team are responsible for a lot of like the subtle animations and the subtle details when it comes to motion, right? And there's not really a great way for us to put that stuff up on a wall, obviously. So when they participate in a wall, and they do, our prototypers still participate in the walls, they start earlier in the process doing a lot of things like storyboards, right? And then kind of describing it almost like an animated movie's storyboard setup where it's like, okay, this happens and then this comes in, and they kind of do like the key frames and they sketch it all out to get validation from the rest of the team about whether what they're thinking about works before they go and then do those subtle details. So it's not appropriate for every level of the project depending on what you're doing, but you can still make use of it for most aspects.
Okay, PJ, thank you very much.
Thank you.